So one of the major stories this month is the steady stream of high-profile Republicans who are now coming out against their own party's nominee for president. And that was before Donald Trump generated more headlines today for a Second Amendment quip that many are interpreting as a threat against Hillary Clinton. Late last night, Senator Susan Collins of Maine became the latest Republican to announce she will not vote for Trump this November, although she did defend him today over those Second Amendment comments.
I've been very critical of Donald Trump, but I actually don't think that's what he was saying. I think he was suggesting that the Second Amendment advocates across the country might be able to come together to pressure the Senate to reject her nominee should she become president. That's how I interpreted it. But it is an example of Donald Trump's looseness with language that can lead to interpretations such as the one put out by Secretary Clinton's camp.
Still, Susan Collins' announcement that she won't be voting for Donald Trump, it puts even more pressure on vulnerable Republican incumbents who are running this year, like New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte. She's been dancing around questions about Trump for a long time now, but today, because of the Collins news, she was forced to address what is clearly her least favorite subject.
You know, obviously there's a presidential race going on. I've said that I'm going to be voting for our nominee, but I've also been quite clear when I've had disagreements with him, which I will continue to do.
Is there anything Donald Trump could do that might make you rethink your position?
Well, obviously I'm going to continue every day to evaluate my support for anyone. So there's nothing different here than there would be in any other situation. I am working and doing what I'm doing, whether I'm running for office or not running for office, which is focusing on getting things done.
So Ayotte is hardly alone here in offering qualified, tepid support for Donald Trump, at least among Republicans. But Collins' clear defection makes her the 6th Republican senator to take a step further and to say not only does she have issues with Donald Trump, but she's not going to vote for him in November. And those 6 senators saying that join at least 10 House Republicans who've also come out against their party's nominee for president. And one of those 10 is Scott Ridgel of Virginia. He's going a step further than that. He's announcing that he will cast his vote for a third-party ticket, the Libertarian ticket. That's led by former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson and his running mate, former Massachusetts Governor William Weld. And joining us now is Republican Congressman Scott Ridgel. He announced today, that he will not support Donald Trump for president. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Well, let me just ask you first about Donald Trump and these comments we've been talking about tonight. Do you take what he said today about Second Amendment people? Do you think he was saying something ominous there, or do you think this is something that's benign and being misinterpreted?
Well, I think it's consistent with his pattern of saying things that can be misinterpreted, but overwhelmingly the sum of everything that he said makes clear to me that he doesn't have the temperament, the judgment, or the character to be commander-in-chief. And I'm 56 years old. I've been a Republican all of my life, and I find myself now in this untenable, really rough situation. And look, I'm joined by literally millions of Americans across this country who are equally offended by the choice on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. And as for me, as I evaluated the two options there, I evaluated a third, and that's two-term Governor Gary Johnson, and I am firmly behind him, and I will cast a confident vote this fall for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, and I think that's the right vote. And I would just ask others to just consider his background and experience, and I think we'll find a lot more momentum building for the Johnson campaign.
I want to ask you more about that in a minute, but first, I was just struck listening to that clip we played there of Kelly Ayotte, a Republican senator from New Hampshire. That's a swing state, obviously. She's up for re-election. Clearly, she doesn't want to be talking about this subject. She's making her disdain for a lot of Trump's comments clear, but she's ultimately saying she feels compelled to support him. You're not running for re-election this year, so you're in a slightly different political situation than her. I just wonder if you could step into her shoes for a minute. If you were running for re-election, if you were facing sort of a swing state, swing district electorate, do you think you'd be taking this additional step still of saying, I'm not voting for Trump, or would you be doing the dance we're seeing Kelly Ayotte do?
Well, I've always shared with my staff that I want to serve without fear and leave without regret. and it's a very difficult decision. And I think it's a legitimate thing to wrestle with, because by virtue of an elected office within a party and as an elected official, obviously we are leaders within our party. And there's a certain degree of fidelity and responsibility that comes with that to the party itself. But there can be times, and there are exceptional moments, and this is one of them, certainly for me, where my own principles are so in conflict with where our party's gone in terms of who we've nominated, to say this person best represents our values. And when I think that that person is Donald Trump, you know, it's just like my head explodes. I mean, you just can't think that this is the person that should lead our country. And so it's different for each person. The struggle that Kelly is going through right now is a legitimate one. I know there are many House members who are right on the edge of maybe flipping and really coming to where they'll be public in opposition to the Trump candidacy. It's a matter of deep principle. We've got to have a clear conscience at the end of the day, each and every one of us as fellow Americans. And for me, that meant, as a Republican, voting for the Libertarian ticket.
How many, you just said others might be coming to this. When we get to Election Day, we say there's about 10 House Republicans right now, about 6 Republican senators saying affirmatively, I'm not voting for Donald Trump. What do you think those numbers are going to be on Election Day?
Well, to some extent, it depends on how Donald Trump conducts himself from now until then. There was a hope. It was a fleeting and false one, and even I held on to it for just a little bit to think, well, maybe if he gets the nomination, he'll somehow, you know, start to glow with wisdom, and he'll conduct himself as a statesman. He did anything but that, and it reinforced my view that he wasn't qualified for the office. I spoke out very clearly on this matter prior to the Virginia primary. I did my very best to influence the outcome. My influence wasn't enough, and I acknowledge that. Even in my own district voted, about 40% of them voted for Donald Trump. But now that he's the nominee, he's embarrassing the Republican Party. The Democratic option is not a clear alternative, at least a favorable one. I believe the record is so clear that Secretary Clinton is misrepresented. That's a nice way of saying that she's been lying to the American people on so many things. She's promising to spend more money on virtually every program within the federal budget. She will wreck our fiscal situation that is already horrible. So where are Americans to go with these two really unpalatable, unacceptable options? And in all candor, it was one of my young interns that was driving me somewhere, and I was talking about how conflicted I was, and he said, well, Congressman, have you given a good look at the Libertarian ticket? And I think it's neat that a young person actually had some influence there, because I had not really considered that option. But the more I looked at the governor, Governor Johnson, and his running mate, Governor Weld, these are two fine Republican governors, each of whom were elected not once but twice in their states. This is a ticket that I think clear-thinking Democrats, clear-thinking independents, and clear-thinking Republicans can get behind. And finally, if we can get 15% in the polling, and he's around that 10, 11%.
Right.
If we can get to 15% polling, then he's going to be in the debates, and that's a game changer.
That is the question. We will know in mid-September if he gets there. Congressman Scott Ridgell from Virginia endorsing the Libertarian ticket, the Johnson-Weld ticket. Thanks for the time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, next.